So I'm deeply interested in making a series about Apollo Justice in particular because it kind of suffers just from being a sequel. It's distinctly delineated from the original trilogy, which is most unfortunate for Apollo Justice. In my opinion, for any distinct body of work following a prior body which is very beloved like the original trilogy, it has to be unequivocally better than the original to get fair critical reception. Apollo Justice bears the need to utilize its new hardware to better the formula of the originals, which isn't made for little DS minigames, without changing the functional premise of the gameplay. The characters have to be more brilliantly animated and to pack in as much of a punch as the original cast after 3 games of writing and development. It's an almost impossible task, which is why the game we got is so awe-inspiring. For the record, Apollo Justice isn't better than the masterpiece that is Trials and Tribulations. It is, however, a fucking fantastic entry, and it's so smart and sharp in almost every way. Turnabout Corner is quite frequently at the bottom of case ranking lists, despite being really a quintessential Ace Attorney case. Its mystery is engaging, and the way that these silly characters interact and impart this really buried but repeated wisdom is remarkable. Speaking of, one of the most shocking characters in day 2 of this case is the one with the noodle wig. His name is Eldoon. Noodle backwards. So, without further ado, let's jump into this retrospective of Turnabout Corner Part 2. So, Waki's fiancée comes to the office and does her best to do her definitely absolutely not guilty pose. She mentions that the Kitakis are transferring their assets out of the mob. Hold on to that. Plum echoes something similar. She mentions a kind of general distrust for Alita. Stay in the business too long and you start to only see darkness in people. This is something of a thesis for the series and this case. Every case reveals some horrible truth. Family members kill and frame one another. So many people are killed and framed by malice and even happenstance. So many lives are ruined beyond repair by these cases, and as we move from case to case, it's easy to see the worst in people and especially members of the trials. Plum also mentions needing a lot of clean money. That's the reason for their transition into legitimate business. Waki's protesting the change, but he's really in a lot of ways a scared kid. He was shot in a shootout because his mom said he could never bear to hurt anyone. The real motivator for taking this case snaps into focus. This isn't about a rookie attorney looking for experience. It's newly about fighting for someone who has no one else who can fight for him. So 1-2 skip a few onto a footprint minigame with Emma Skye. I have to gush over what a great idea it is to include her. Her costume design is perfect. The necktie and glasses and little bracelet. I really love Gumshoe, but the series kind of needed someone new, and she's absolutely perfect. So now the real investigation. Apollo and Trucy enter the victim's clinic and find a missing pair of sandals that were found at the scene, and quite a lot of strewn bowls. The victim's clinic has been broken into, so sure, let's break some laws and investigate around here. In the safe is Mr. Waki Kitaki's medical records with Dr. Maractus and Nurse Alita Tiala's name. There's exactly one person we can take these medical records to, Mr. Guy Eldoon, the noodle character. The bullet hasn't been removed because Pal Maractus couldn't operate, for fear of killing the mob boss's son. This moment is genuinely pretty surprising and dramatic. Ace Attorney doesn't do reveals like this often. It's kind of a genuine surprise that this dude, whose name backwards is Noodle Guy, has any kind of depth. Waki had half a year to live, half a year ago. There's a darkness in this world, Trucy doll, waiting and hungry. When you're up against real evil, well, it doesn't matter if you're weak or strong. It'll take you all the same. Alita knew Waki was dying, and with that, with the main idea doubled down on, we go to court. So we enter court to this fucking banging court lobby theme. Apollo only got 2 hours of sleep going over data for the case. Apollo was really an excellent character in this case, and as the web begins to kind of unwind in front of him and he gets a glimpse into this darkness Eldoon mentioned, he doubles down and goes from a sort of silly, nervous wreck to a really genuinely devoted and powerful participant. Also, for the record, Trucy and Phoenix have a really charming relationship. So Lita Tiala will testify against her betrothed. This case is kind of begging us to distrust her, to see the worst in her, despite how in love with her Waki is. Leading with the record, Apollo immediately takes a shot at Tiala, and our suspicions are confirmed as her sweet expression tightens and freezes over. Alita tries to tell a lie, and Gavin shuts her down. He's kind of reminiscent of Edgeworth shutting his own witness down and telling them not to lie. It's time for the best idea but worst part of this game, to focus on Alita Tiala's habit where she lies. This minigame pops up in every trial. So on a box of testimony, move a circular cursor over the witness and look for like a twitch characteristic of a lie. It's such a good idea to have him be able to perceive people lying, but it's so fucking annoying and cumbersome in practice. So she fiddles with her ring during the word now. Very cool. More evidence piles up against Alita, and Waki interrupts again and confesses to the murder. Alita cuts him off and confesses to getting engaged with Waki for the inheritance. This is the real Alita. This is the darkness that Eldoon talked about. But there's still no good evidence that she killed anyone. We move on to the real discrepancy from the trial yesterday. If the victim was shot in the right temple after he turned his head north, how could the killer be Waki? Who killed Maractus and from where? This is the big moment of puzzle solving in this case, and it's a great puzzle. The penalty is doubled. The killer would have to been where the noodle stand stood. The bowls in the clinic were cleared out to make room to lug someone around in the stand. But who? Why? During testimony, Tiala scratches her neck out of habit. Below her scarf is a mark where she was strangled nearly to death. She couldn't have been the killer. She was blacked out and on the verge of death. Alita Tiala requests to leave, and the judge begins to agree when...
Objection!
Clavier interjects. What a fucking badass this guy is. He demands Apollo finish what he began. Maractus nearly killed Tiala. And then what? The case is a total 180 as Alita and Gavin point out a tremendous contradiction. If things really happened as they say, and Maractus was moving Tiala in the noodle cart, why wouldn't he have just taken his car? This is the last contradiction in the case, and it comes back to... Take that! The panty thief. So Wesley Stickler shoved the panties into the exhaust pipe. The car wouldn't start. The only option was the noodle stand. Alita confesses and the trial is over. Waki and his dad begin to argue, but now we know why the Kitakis are transitioning into owning a restaurant. They need clean money for Waki's procedure. This is the second sprite transition, and it's just as surprising and moving as the first. And really, this case is super well done in my opinion. The minigames are fun, The way that they encouraged engagement with the evidence was great. Alita is a decent villain, and Eldoon is a pretty fun character. Really, all three Kitakis shine in a great way. The animation on pretty much everyone is outstanding. The soundtrack is perfect and absolutely fitting for an Ace Attorney entry, and the flow and logic of the puzzles is pretty simple to follow and very satisfying. It's the second case in an entry meant for new fans, so it doesn't have to be overly complicated right off the bat. For me, this is a very satisfying and tight case. It's the last case not to suffer from way too much weight, and for all intents and purposes, it's a fantastic dynamic case. Waki's moment with his dad still chokes me up. It's the answer to the thesis of this chapter. This is the answer to the darkness that surrounds us in personal tragedy and betrayal and watching our loved ones get sick and hurt. It's those close to us. For every member of our family, biological or otherwise, who chose to fight for us at any cost in court or in a family-owned business, we're more likely to persevere and continue battling. We're all shoved in the back of a noodle truck, moved along by the wheel of fate, but as later chapters go out of their way to point out, we're always surrounded by family. Please don't think too hard about the noodle cart analogy. It sucked eggs.